Hey there, welcome back. If you haven't had a chance, go back and watch videos 1 through 3. So that way, when you get to this video, you'll be completely clued in to fill in any holes that might be missing for you from this story. But without further ado, let's just get right into this video. We're going to talk about how I believe I became a targeted individual. This is my backstory to provide context about everything that inspired me to come up with this series. So, September 2022, my spouse was stationed out in San Diego, California. We ended up moving into an off base military housing development out there. We essentially liked the neighborhood. It suited our purposes for what we needed at the time. But we quickly, came to, really dislike our stay, myself specifically. And that more so had to do with some interactions that I had with some neighbors, two particular neighbors in particular that, or specifically, that I didn't have such good interactions with. Um, I ended up having to report them to our leasing office due to just a lot of shenanigans that were going on. With one of the neighbors, we were dealing with them like tampering with our packages and like cutting across our driveway at odd hours of the night. We didn't initially have like cameras and stuff like that before we moved in, but because of a lot of this stuff going on, we did end up investing in cameras, and we also uh invested in a door camera to, keep eye on our packages when they would arrive, because we just started to notice a trend that the first group of neighbors seemed to just be really weirdly fascinated and fixated on when we would get packages and things. But anywho, with the other group of neighbors, it was more so an issue that we had with their son bringing their dog up around our front door to like pee and poop, and oftentimes would leave the, dog excrement in our area. And that type of behavior just kind of got out of control. And then it also was even weirder because this young man, I guess, would be watching my comings and goings, because I would oftentimes go on mornings in the walk, or excuse me, walks in the morning around like 4:35 in the morning, because I was having like really bad insomnia, unrelated to all this, but I was just having really bad insomnia at the time. So I would just try to get my day kicked off right. So I'm like, hey, if I'm up, might as well just go, take a walk around the neighborhood, and that's what I would do. And initially, he wasn't, I guess, showing up at my house. I'd say maybe the first week or two, but shortly then after, I started noticing a pattern that this boy would be outside my home like 5:30, 6 in the morning, every morning, after I would come home from my walks, because I would oftentimes get into the habit of opening up my blinds and stuff like that to let light in and just get started with my day, because of course I homeschool my kids, and so I would just be up early getting things ready for our day. And I would, just looking out my blinds or looking out my window, and there's this boy just standing, inches away from my front door with his dog, and he just stared back at me, and I would just stand there staring at him, like, as if to think, like, wait, whose kid is this? And like, where are your parents? Like, why are you out here so early? And no supervision. But again, I never approached the young man. I never to this day said a word to the young man, even with all the future shenanigans that would transpire with this young man, because things did escalate, of course, but I never said anything to the child. But it did get to a head when, I'd say, after 6 months of dealing with this type of behavior, because again, it wasn't just those two things, but it came to a point where this young man was running across our driveway, running on our, front patio. This is more so what took place after we reported him and or his family, I would say, the first and second time. And he was just doing a lot of things around our home. He intentionally get his little buddies to come and do the same behavior. So it ended up just becoming like a really big nuisance. And initially, I didn't know who this child's parents were. I mean, I still really don't know them on a like a first name basis or anything like that. I've never, met the people in terms of, having a conversation. I have like spoken to his mother without knowing that I was speaking to his mother in passing on one of my walks one morning. I just said, good morning, but she just kind of looked at me kind of funnily and just kept going. And this was before, of course, any of the reporting because, like I said, I didn't know anybody in the neighborhood really at the time. So, um, that family was the first family that I reported, more so because, like I said, the antics with the dog and stuff like that. And shortly after we reported him to leasing, we had to report again because the behavior did not stop and change. And this is the fight, excuse me, despite being told by our leasing office, because they essentially played mediator over the phone between us and that family, that the mother had expressed that if we did have any other future concerns with the child, that we could come to him. But I didn't feel comfortable um, approaching these individuals just because, like I said, that the behavior did not stop. And there's actually an occasion where the young boy triggered my doorbell camera, and I could see where it was like him, running across with the dog or whatever. And then his mother was in view of the camera watching him do it. And so I just kind of got from that, that she was either, if she wasn't originally aware of what he was doing, she was now, but uh, I guess seemingly approved of that behavior. So I just kind of took that to mean like, yeah, she might be saying, yeah, we can come talk to her, but I don't honestly think it would have resolved anything, me personally, in this moment. And to those of you wondering why I decided to report opposed to trying to figure out who his parents were and talk to him and all that jazz, is because I my preferred method, especially in a situation like this, was to just have the issue nipped in the bud 100%. From my understanding, we were told by the leasing office that they would just simply issue them a warning, whatever that means, because it was agreement in our lease statement that as residents, which I think is pretty much for everyone renting, that you're not to be a nuisance or a disturbance to your neighbors, and that you're responsible for your own guests. And even if they harass neighbors and stuff like that, that you still could be responsible and stuff like that. Of course, being responsible over your children as well, and animals. And that they did have a pet leash law, as in the state of California too, but also being enforced in the neighborhood, and that every pet owner is supposed to pick up after their animals. So this wasn't a case where I was just, being a mean cranky pants for no reason. Like, no, it got, like I said, it got to be so incessant that, anytime my camera would chime, it was this boy. And sometimes he would bring friends along. Sometimes it'd just be him. Sometimes, it'd be him and a sibling. Like it became like a regular thing. And I pretty much, just had it. But what ended up connecting these two groups of neighbors was a situation with the my direct next door neighbors. I had been, like I said, experiencing things with this family as well, tampering with my packages, and then the husband like cutting across our lawnway to go to the mailbox and stuff, and just other things like them trying to, I guess, or their son coming onto our or not patio, our front door area and stuff like that. Again, triggering our cameras, and the type of cameras we have, we are able to establish zones, and where we would draw those zones is more so meant to watch our walkway and our front door area for, of course, package deliveries, and of course, if we had any guests or whatever visiting, which in our case we rarely did, but um, So it's a situation that our cameras weren't ever recording anything or anybody unless it was triggered. So you can imagine how annoying that will become when every time you look at your camera, you're thinking it's a package, you're thinking it's someone, actually coming to visit you. It's no, it's these kids playing around. And in this case, it was a toddler, which again, not mad at a toddler. I understand toddlers wander and get away from people, and that's understandable. But I felt like it got to a point where these people were using their toddler to cause a nuisance towards us. And because of the situation dynamic with it being a child, a small child, of course you can see how that might sound like, oh, you just don't like babies. Like, no, that's not it at all. My family and I just simply wanted to live in our home and be at peace and not have, children, small or otherwise, triggering our cameras all day long. Because again, that's not what we inherently purchased them for, but it did end up contributing to, us just furthering, making sure that we're protecting our home and having security up, not just, like I said, against children, because other nuisances that happen later on down the line or through the years were orchestrated by adults as well. So, but with this particular neighbor group, um, again, the shenanigans have been going on for months. So again, this is not a like a one-off situation. These things have been going on for months. And on the day that I finally had a reaction to these behaviors, I had just come from the hospital the day previous. I had a slight emergency, a medical emergency for myself, and so I was not in the best of moods. I also was still recovering from the medications I had been given. So I can honestly admit that, yeah, my emotional mindset at that point was not the best because I just was, a bit more irritable than usual. And for whatever reason, I guess they chose to decide to pick that day to, I guess try to get a rise out of me. And they did. And basically, it was that, the husband was following behind his toddler or beside his toddler up into my driveway. And at the time, I was sitting in my driveway in my vehicle. I had backed it in because I had just come back from uh, having a day out with my children at the park. And I forget what I was doing. I was trying to find something. I was just, messing around in my glove box, and I had my door open in the garage, and then I happened to see, or I happened to look up, and I happened to see a man bent down, like facing my car, but standing like I'd say a couple of feet away, or like a couple of steps away from my garage. It wasn't a situation where he was down on the sidewalk. Like, no, this man was literally in my driveway. Um, and if the car hadn't been there and I was just standing there, we would have been able to touch. Let's just put it like that. And because I have a SUV, I wasn't able to see the small child. So when I saw the man bent down, I immediately like stepped out of my car and I was like, "Can I help you? Like, what's going on?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm trying to get my son." And then I was able to see the child, and I was like, "Okay." I said, "But yeah," I said, "No, you've been doing this for some time, like, and of course I have previous incidents of him doing stuff like this on my can't record it." And I was like, "You're not just trying to get your child, like you've been doing this for a while." And I said, "Just stop harassing my family, like, and I just was like, I was just basically telling him like, bye, 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 over and over. And he did apologize in that moment and say that, "Oh, I'm just trying to get my son." And I apologize. And he's like, "I'm not harassing nobody." And then, proceeded to pick up his son and walk out the driveway. And of course, in that moment, I was, like I said, a little more irritable than usual. I was also scared because, like I said, I had been enduring antics like this from this man and his family for quite some time, of them just essentially like invading me and my family's personal space for whatever reason. Because this was not the first time that this man has done this. There was another occasion that I wasn't able to get on film where he stood directly behind my vehicle while my garage was open, smiling a creepy smile. And my car is tinted. And at the time, I was working on a craft project in my garage. I had the garage door open, and this man, like, literally, I just caught him out of the glimpse of my eye when I looked up, because he stood there for a few moments just standing there holding his son's hand and doing this like weird creepy smile, and then just like quickly ran off. For whatever reason, my cameras didn't pick up that interaction, even though it should have, but I still saw him. So again, this was a behavior that this man had exhibited multiple times. And so this time in particular, seeing as it happened right in the moment, I decided to say something about it. And that was my reaction. I did also go ahead and get on the phone with my husband right after that happened. And, I had made mention to him that I was going to call a detective or whatever, because I was just saying whatever at that moment to make sure that this man knew, like, hey, you're making me feel uncomfortable. And if I need to call or contact law enforcement, I will. Because, again, I didn't have an issue with him getting his son, but it's the fact that this has been a pattern of him using his son as an excuse to come over onto our personal, rental without permission. And I'm glad that I called it out, because I was able, after that interaction, I was able to go inside and review the actions from both points of view from both of my cameras. So my camera that was located at my doorbell, as well as my camera in my driveway. And I was able to see that he was diagonally cutting across the grass common area that we shared in that community, which was considered communal area for the grassy area, and that his son was walking right beside him the entire time before he reached my driveway. And the reason I mention that is because he had ample time to stop his son from, walking into my driveway, if that was indeed his aim, like he claimed, but he didn't. And even when he stepped foot into my driveway, he had already held out his arm, holding back his son from proceeding walking forward. But then he still proceeded to bend down and look, and like bending down looking into my garage. So that I thought was really odd. And even my husband and I, when he got a chance to review the footage early or later on, he also was like, yeah, that's weird. He's like, he could have picked him up at any time if that was the case. It wasn't a situation where the boy was running away from him or anything. The boy was walking right in step with him, side by side. So he could have stopped him and picked him up at any time. And then I also was able to see from them triggering my cameras that his wife also was walking uh uh, out with them, but she decided to take the sidewalk with their two dogs. So she was lagging behind when I had that whole interaction with him. She never once came up. She never once said anything, at least not to me. But like I said, after they trigger my camera still records a good time after these things happen. And they didn't, after I went in, I closed up my garage. They did end up going or walking back home using the sidewalk or whatever. And from what my camera picked up, it picked up her also doing the same creepy smile. So after I saw all that, I was like, okay, so this was a play. Which is what I believed it to be in the first place, which is why I didn't accept his apology, because I knew that it was bullshit, if I'm being completely honest. And the man was visibly, like, I guess, shaken up by me saying something to him, because, like I said, on previous occasions where he's done it, I was either not outside to directly, say or do anything about it, and or I had just in the past ignored the behavior. But this time around, like I said, he fucked around and he found out. And mind you, If anyone's worried about the child's well-being, the child was completely calm during the entire interaction. Never started crying because I didn't raise my voice. I just spoke very sternly, in my strong tone, like I tend to do. And but the little boy was never scared. He even was saying bye to me when I was saying bye, even though I was saying it to his father. I never once addressed the toddler because again, I wasn't mad at a toddler. I was, upset with his father and that, again, he had just continued to do this behavior of being creepy and hanging out around my house, especially like at night. He would have this habit of cutting across our driveway, going back and forth to his mailbox or to the mailbox. And like I said, and that type of behavior ramped up even more after this encounter. Um, so after I went inside, after all that transpired, I ended up my camera ended up being triggered again in my driveway. This time it's a tall white male who had a dog with him. Now, I didn't recognize the male. I didn't know who the male was, but I recognized the dog. And the dog in question belonged to the other family that I had previously reported. Um, so I'm assuming, because I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming they must have been friends or had become friends or whatever, and they must have told him what happened, and I guess he felt emboldened to, I guess, want to come down there and I guess show force. I don't know what his true intentions are. However, I was, like I said, already on edge and just a little irritable and scared in that moment for my family's safety because I'm like, I don't know who this man is. I don't know what he wants, but he was like, looking menacingly into my camera. And he again directly came into my driveway, not down the driveway, but up a few feet away from my garage door. And, it was like staggering around. And from what I saw, he looked like he was drunk. If I'm just being completely honest, I don't know that to be true, but he was staggering around. And this dog in question is a very small dog. I don't know what type of dog it is because not one I've ever really seen before, but it was a very, very small dog. I'd say like a couple, maybe like one or two sizes bigger than a Chihuahua, if I'm being completely honest. But the way the way the man was staggering around, you thought this was some, German Shepherd or something pulling him. It was just kind of weird. And then shortly after the man started staggering out of my driveway, then there's this other person, which I think was a man who shows up on a bicycle in a dark hoodie with a black dog, and they like meet in the middle of the street, like dapping each other up or talking to each other or whatever. But I just thought that all of that was weird because I'm like, okay, what is going on? Like, why are these people, over here around my home? Like, I don't know what's going on. And like I said, at the time, I was not in my best frame of mind, so I still was a very upset about everything just as a whole, not just what had happened that night, but just being fed up with people seemingly trying to bother and pester my family when, again, we didn't know any of these people. We'd not done anything to any of these people. We just was living our lives, staying to ourselves. My husband, unfortunately, was not home the night that all this transpired. He was on duty. And but like I said, I did call him and I had him on the phone. And we basically just decided to go ahead and call the security company within our neighborhood to see if they could just do a drive by and just make sure, these people done disperse and that they're not trying to do anything crazy or whatever. But we were informed that that they're on a tight schedule and that they weren't able to send anyone over, but I was informed by the operator to just go ahead and call non-emergency police, and that's what I did. My husband and I both were on the line with them that night, and we just basically gave them a description of both of the males in question, and also we also gave them a gist of what had happened. And I know the operator that I spoke to agreed with me in the sense that they felt that the neighbors that live directly across from us that I should possibly pursue a restraining order of some site for the sole fact of them tampering with our packages. But at the time, I still didn't have all the information I needed. So I wanted to make sure I knew all of my options before, going to that because I felt like in that case, like that was extreme. And I know some are like, oh, well, calling the police is extreme. But again, this was non emergency. This was not a life threatening 911 event. And in any case, the officer didn't respond to the call until the next morning. So, unfortunately, like I said, being anxious and just hyper vigilant about that moment, I ended up staying up all night. I was a wreck pretty much the whole night. I'm not gonna lie to you, I crashed out. I was talking real reckless. I was, just as you can imagine, I just was fed up with a lot of the stuff that I had been putting up with, and yeah, I just let it all out essentially that night. But I stayed up all night to just make sure my boys were protected because I also didn't understand why these grown men felt like they needed to, again, show force to a woman, considering the fact that, again, I'm a woman, I'm not a man. I didn't put my hands on no one, I didn't raise my voice at anyone. Like, nothing transpired in the sense that any man should have needed to get involved at all in terms of trying to come and do anything towards me. Um, but anyway, my thought process that whole night was just like, oh well, if they want to start some, we can have something. Like I said, I was just talking real reckless. I was really not in my best frame of mind, and this kind of is what started a lot of my mental, like stress that I was starting to exhibit from having encounters and situations like this. And I can definitely admit that a lot of it was exacerbated by, I believe, just my personality. I naturally have an anxious personality type just because of past traumas that I've endured in my life and certain, assault situations I've been involved in and have been a victim of. So it's like, yeah, I really, when it comes to, especially men like that, like I don't feel comfortable around the opposite sex in that capacity. So, unless, like I said, it's my significant other per se. So it just, I don't know, I was just really uncomfortable. And yeah, it was just really tough. But anywho, I ended up, waiting till the next morning. I was able to get some sleep, but for the most of the night, I was up. Um, when the officer arrived, I was able to not only show him the videos and everything, but explain to him, why I thought it was weird behavior, and then also give him a gist of some of the other behaviors that, or some of the other things that these people had done, and and he agreed that from seeing the video that the man doing all that was weird. And he was like, he didn't understand why he would need to do that. But he said, technically what he did wasn't criminal, per se. He's like, however, um, him being in your driveway, technically is your private property. So if you ask someone to leave and they don't leave, you have every right to, call the police. And I was like, okay, thank you, good to know. And he said, and also I recommend, you could put up no trespassing signs and stuff like that to deter people because in California, typically you would need to have some type of fencing up to be able to criminally trespass someone. So that way it's like, hey, you actively came into, my inner space. So, it'd be considered criminal. But that wasn't the case. One, because we were renting, and then two, just the way of the landscape of the home, we weren't able to figure out a way to harden it off at that time. We did figure it out later on, and we came up with a temporary solution later on, which I'll get into in a few. But he was just like, I recommend putting up no trespassing. He's like, again, if you ask people to leave and they don't leave, that's when you can call 911 and have them trespass and all that. And he also did give me more information about the different types of restraining orders that I could potentially do if necessary. But I told him, I said, I'm not, I said, it's not a situation where I'm trying to put a restraining order on people. I said, I just want the behavior to stop. I just want people to just, again, if you're not here for business, if you don't have actual, if you don't have something, you don't know us, we're not friends, whatever, like just leave our space alone, please. Like just leave us alone. And that's basically, what that's all I wanted was just for it to stop. That's it. I wasn't willing to go that far at that point. Um, but I will say, while I was speaking to him towards the end of our conversation, the female or the wife of the said, male that was next door, she came out with her dogs, I guess, trying to hear the conversation. Because I also know that magically there were other neighbors outside who was standing around just, I guess, watching me speaking to the officer, which I didn't care in that moment because I'm like, at the end of the day, these are the same people that'll sit around here and have been watching all this other stuff go on and not said anything. So it's like, if people want to hate me for exercising my right to make sure that I protect me and my family, so be it. I really don't care. But mind you, she didn't say anything to me. I didn't say anything to her, but I did, briefly look up and I saw again that she had that creepy smile on her face. So I was like, okay. And I remember him asking, he's like, oh, you have anything else to say? And I said, no, and I just went ahead and went on with my day. Me and my boys ended up having to go somewhere, so I just went on with my day. So after this situation, things really ramped up between these two groups of neighbors. More and more things started happening with people's children, essentially willfully trespassing in our driveway, riding their bikes, their scooters, their, playing ball in the street, and magically, stuff was just always ending up in our driveway. These children were always ending up in our driveway. There were a couple of occasions where other neighbors were literally like just parked out on our driveway. And you might ask yourself, well, why didn't you say nothing? Why didn't you, tell them about the trespass and stuff? Well, I didn't in that moment because I just really didn't know how to navigate it, considering that these are children. And again, because the attitude I had at the time is that I don't want to sit here and be yelling at people's kids all day. I'm not that type of person. I don't want to be that person, but unfortunately, I feel like they slowly tried to make me into that person. They said I hear screaming and yelling at people's kids when at the end of the day, these adults were oftentimes standing around watching these children do these things and or encouraging them to do these things. And I just really didn't understand why these people were using their children as pawns, essentially, and especially playing around in our driveway, considering the dangers that can come with you know, um, children being hurt in driveways. And it was at this point that I myself even stopped allowing my children to play in the driveway because I had educated myself on the statistics about how often children are injured in driveways. And it's actually a very high number of statistics. And it's oftentimes these children are injured by their own family members in their driveways. So that's another reason I just stopped altogether sitting out there. Not to mention, every time it got to the point, anytime I come out my home, these people are sitting in their driveways just watching me and my family. When we were still playing outside in that area, they just be, camped up watching us, like we were a zoo exhibit. And I don't know, I just got tired of it. And I got to the point where I was like, if they want to have that little grassy area to play in, so let them have it. Like I'm not worried about that. We just again ultimately just wanted all of that stuff to stop, but it didn't. And I recall we were even reached out to by our leasing office at a certain point in time, asking us if we, had any more issues with our neighbors in particular that we had reported originally. And we were like, I told her, I said, at this particular moment, I didn't. And that's because I didn't have a grievance per se with anyone in specific, but the entire time, none of the behavior stopped. So it just got to the point where my husband and I had to resolve to the point of just recognizing, like, hey, if we're good, we're not hurt, our kids aren't hurt, excuse me, and our property essentially isn't hurt, we're just gonna let it be and let it and just document what we need to document and let it be. But like I said again, none of the behavior stopped. Again, it just felt like things kept amplifying. And it got to the point where, like I said, adults were getting involved now. They were bringing their dogs. It get to a point where same types of adult or same adults would be like around my home early in the morning. Um, as soon as I'd open my blinds, they'd be the first thing I'd see, and then they magically walk away, and it got really, really weird. People would just be lingering outside my home, staring at my cameras. Like it was, I don't know, it was really, really strange. And of course, with this type of behavior, it made me behave a little more erratic than usual. I became super hyper vigilant. I feel like I was like, I had become really, really just like reclusive there for a minute because my nerves were just so bad. And I really just wanted like all of it to stop, but it's like, how do you get a whole neighborhood of people to leave you alone? If I sit here and call the police on one, then magically all these other people show up, and it's like it became a never-ending cycle. Things would slow down for a time, I would notice, but never ultimately stopped. And I personally was just, like I said, just fed up with a lot of the behaviors. And I will admit also that to garner more privacy for our space, I ended up installing like privacy window films on just about all of my windows. And initially, these weren't installed for that purpose, but I pretty much started in my garage, and it was more so for an event. It wasn't for privacy reasons at that time. But again, if you live in California, like the rental situations and how close people's homes are. And I nor my family was used to that. And we still were adjusting to living out there and being that close in proximity to our neighbors. And I think that's something that also just really made our stay just not so great because like I said, where we're from, we grew up in the country essentially, or more so myself. I grew up in the country, so I'm used to being on land. I'm used to having a house to itself and or like a house, but a decent amount of space away. So that was another thing too that I was, I guess, feeling a little homesick and stuff like that too. But anyway, like I never went out of my way to directly, like I said, confront any of these people or whatever. I will say that um I'm the type of person that I like to avoid conflict. I am conflict avoidant in most cases. However, I'm not like that anymore in this moment. Like I'm in a place where if something happens, I'm just gonna address it head on, and whatever happens, happens at this point. But in that moment, like I said, I was super anxious, still doing a lot of mental stress from that situation, and just, having all these children. And it got to the point where I just was getting really bogged down because I was starting to feel like, again, hyper vigilant about like backing out of my driveway and stuff like that, because the way that these children would come out of nowhere darting across my driveway and stuff really made me nervous that one day I was going to hit someone, because that of how these children were darting across, and just being in my driveway and stuff like that with their bikes and scooters and all this stuff. It was a lot. So eventually, we did install no trespassing signs, and I'm sure we look like crazy people, or more so myself, when I installed all those things. I know I look like the nut on the block, but it was the only other thing I could think to do. And like I said, I will say when we installed those signs that, again, things did die down. Did they ultimately stop? No, but they did die down because we still had a few individuals that still would use like their dogs when they're walking by to like walk and trigger my camera, and that's ultimately what a lot of this was. It was just about them triggering my camera. I grew to just give up the fight on the okay people cutting across the driveway because it just was happening so much. But it was the triggering our cameras, the going out of their way to trigger our cameras, and I had to keep adjusting our zones to move it further and further up away from where the sidewalk was, because I noticed the pattern of certain individuals just more and more encroaching and coming closer and closer into the driveway to trigger our cameras. And and of course, like I said, once my camera is triggered, it automatically starts recording whatever's going on. So, and during all this, no one ever approached us. No one ever spoke to us about any grievances that they may have had with us. But like I said, at that point, because it was so many people and so many children and all this stuff doing these things, I had resolved that I didn't have a particular grievance with any one person. At that point, it was a neighborhood like thing for people to be doing that type of stuff. And and I do feel like these two particular family groups of neighbors um really kicked it off. And it was never, for me, it was never a personal thing of not wanting to be around these people, like, oh, I just don't like these type of people or what. It like, no, it just had everything to do with, I'm a person that just likes to mind my business and stay to myself. And I didn't go out of my way to um introduce myself or nothing like that. Like I said, with the exception of the one particular neighbor, and that was only because her package was left on my door. Other than that, I probably would have never met her the entire time. But I do believe that these people were curious about us, and I can understand now how that may have manifested in the way that it did. And of course, after me having that reaction and calling the police, I'm sure, I became the hated woman on the block, like, oh, how dare she call the police, we didn't do nothing to her, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like, yeah, you may not have physically touched me, but at the end of the day, you know what you're doing. And I'm the type of person, like, I'm not going to sit here and explain to a grown person what they're doing. We all are grown enough to know what we're doing and our behaviors and actions and our intentions. So it's like, yeah, no, I'm never going to apologize for that. So if anyone is listening that's a part of that clique and hoping that, no, baby, I'm not going to apologize. I'm always going to stand 10 toes down on every decision that I made at that time, good or bad. And I can also take accountability for any decision that I made, good or bad, during that time. Um, are there some things that I believe I could have handled a little differently? Absolutely. But I don't believe that anyone has the right to tell you how to react to their, abuse and their disrespect. So, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sitting here saying that I was petty back to these people and, oh, I was cutting across the. I never once stepped into any of these people's personal space. Like I said, with the exception of the one neighbor to give her her package, that was it. And I had another neighbor whose package got delivered to my door, and I also did the same for them, but they didn't answer their door at all. So I was like, okay, fine, cool, whatever. But other than that, I never bothered these people. How I ended up, so I want to segue back to the second family with the child with the dog situation. I ended up finding out where they lived because they actually only lived two houses down from me, which I didn't know at the time, but I was driving in the neighborhood on my way home, and I happened to see the kid outside playing outside of a house. And I was like, oh, so maybe that's where he lives. So, like I said, I just kept that under my mental hat. And then when instance happened again with him with the dog situation, I walked on the sidewalk, got the house number, and then went back to my house. I never once went to their door. I never once came off of the sidewalk. I simply was on the sidewalk. I know some people might feel like, oh, well, you followed that child home. I never followed any child home. There were no children present. There was no one present. There was no one outside at the time. And I didn't even know for sure if that is where he lived, but it's just because that's the only place I had ever seen him outside of being outside of my door. I just assumed, like, okay, maybe this is where he lives. And that's how I was able to report him and his family, I should say, to the leasing office. Now, again, I know everyone's going to have mixed feelings about how I handle things, and I even have mixed feelings about how I handle things. But at the end of the day, I can't do anything to change it. It's past. Again, do I have some things I feel like I could have done different? Yes, but ultimately, it's not something I can change. Um, Anywho, a lot of this stuff, like I said, just continued to escalate, and eventually, my family and I were able to figure out an idea in how we could put up temporary like fencing around our front door and our walkway, as well as our partially on our driveway, to hope, or to help to keep these children out of that space, and to also give ourselves a little grace when we're backing out of our driveway. So, if someone did dart across, hopefully, the fencing being down along the sides of it a little bit would give us a little space to be able to stop if necessary. Because the vehicle I have is an older vehicle, it doesn't have a backup camera or none of that. So I'm always simply relying on sight alone. But like I said, some of these children that were being allowed to do these things and dart across my driveway or walk across my driveway were like toddlers or smaller children. And then I'd say a handful of like, you know, maybe third, fourth, fifth graders, maybe. But those children didn't were like here and there, or I would say they were the ones that would cut through the most. But like when there was the smaller ones, those were the ones I would get really nervous about because I literally could not see them when I'm in my car, and I did not oftentimes use my driveway camera because I would mount my phone on my phone holder and I proceed out of my driveway. And I will say that there were a couple of instances where I was just like, I was just so over it. I was like, I don't even care anymore. Like, if someone kid get hit, it won't be on my conscience because at the end of the day, I'm doing all of these things. I got the trespassing signs up, I got the fencing up, and it was still happening. So I was like, you know what? Bet if something happens, it happens. Like, it won't be on my conscience. And I know that how that might sound, but if you are a person that's endured something similar to this, you can empathize and you can understand where I'm coming from. I was just over it. Not that I wanted anyone's child to get hurt because that's literally why I was doing all of those things. But I just kind of got to the point where I'm like, well, if these people don't care about their own children's well-being, why should I? You know? And there were a couple of instances within the neighborhood where um I encountered children as well as adults like trying to either dart out towards my vehicle while I was driving and or walk out as I was passing by, just blatantly just walking out. And I never would like stop abruptly. I would always have enough time to just maneuver around, so that's what I did. And I feel like after a couple of those instances, people in the neighborhood all were getting all up in arms because again, the antics would amp back up. So I was like, okay, so let me get this straight. I'm in my own home, that bothers you guys. Minding my business, that bothers you guys. I'm in my driveway, that bothers you guys. I'm trying to back out of my driveway, that bothers you guys. I'm trying to drive down the street to get to my home, that bothers you guys. So it's like, it's like it started to feel like it didn't matter what I did, what I would do. These people were just annoyed just by anything that I would do. And this was even more so apparent when after we had gotten our cameras and had installed them, because anytime that my husband would have to go out and adjust our cameras or update our cameras or do anything for our cameras, magically random people would just show up walking around our area, staring at us, making weird comments and stuff. And it was so bad that it got to the point I even like I there was a night I was just I don't know, I was just up at super early, which isn't uncommon for me. And I was working on my cameras because I was experiencing a lot of internet trouble at the time, and so I had to go restart my cameras, and it was I'd say like 2 in the morning or something. I know it may have looked weird, but again, I wasn't bothering anyone. I just went out, adjusted my cameras, went back in. Again, next morning, all of these people out of nowhere, just all in my space, staring at my camera. It just got really, really weird. And, it just got to the point I was like, dang, I feel like I can't do anything. I can't breathe. I can't live. I can't, go to parks. I can't do anything because again, you think that, oh, this would just be behavior that I would experience within the neighborhood and that was that. No, it got to the point where these people were following me outside of the neighborhood, following me and my family to the local parks that I would oftentimes take my family to and my boys to, and even local stores because I know towards the end of us moving, we finally had encountered one of the neighbors that we had previously reported at a store. And I thought it was odd because I was like, now the entire time I've lived here, I've never run into anyone from the neighborhood that I recognize before at a store. And then all of a sudden, magically, this family is at the same store we're at shortly after we arrived. So it became really clear that these people, like I said, were stalking us and were following us and still, slandering us, I guess, all in the process to garner so many new individuals to come along and join in on the fun, I guess, so to speak, for them at least, because it was hell for me. And and there were a couple of occasions where I thought that it really was going to get the better of me, because of course it was stressing my husband out that I was stressed out. And gratefully I can admit that my children, thank God, were never really aware of a lot of the stuff that was going on with the with a lot of this stuff, because we kept them out of it, because at that time it had nothing to do with them. But it got to the point where some of these children within the neighborhood even got to the point where they were threatening my child, when he would try to go to the parks within the neighborhood, and threatening him, to call the police on him. And he even got threatened with a bat by a group of kids that were trying to like gang up on him and stuff. So it got really like crazy really quick. And that was a situation where when that instance happened, my eldest son actually went out to try to see what was going on, because I was working on a vehicle at the time, or on our other vehicle, installing some stuff. And when he got out there, of course there was no one out there. But I just told him, I had said it out loud. I was like, yeah, I said, I hope no one isn't out here threatening my child with a bat, because I said that's the situation. I'm just gonna call the police. Like I'm not gonna sit here and go back and forth with anyone's parents. I'm like, there's no reason for any child to be out here threatening another child with bodily harm with a weapon. So, and I know I may have looked like a mad woman, because I did end up walking the neighborhood in our little area to see, where these kids may have ran off to or whatever, so that I could possibly talk to their parents, or figure out or see that they actually did have a weapon. But magically they disappeared. But they did end up showing back up, because I ended up going out there and sitting out with my son while he was at the park. And then they ended up walking back by, but they didn't have the bat magically at that time. And I just was like, yeah, this is weird. Like, and the sad thing is about that, of that group of children, I ended up finding out from my son, that the children that were there were actually visiting. They actually didn't even live there. They were visiting their cousins, and the cousin actually told my son, was like, yeah, they do stuff like this all the time, and that they actually bully me and my siblings when they come and visit us. So, like, yeah, they do this all the time. And I was like, yeah, that's really sad. And she, apologized to my son for, their behavior at the end. But I was like, clearly there's a problem with people not, talking to their children about stuff that's appropriate and not appropriate, and how you approach, people, and just what you should and shouldn't be doing. Because I know for a fact that if the shoe were on the other foot and my child had been going around threatening other children with bodily harm, I know it would have ended up, way worse. But yeah, like these are just some, again, not even everything, just some examples. And with the two particular families, I believe that they were the catalyst for what ended up being a lot of the, harassment that my family later did endure. I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you and say like, oh, that there weren't occasions where I may have just, again, just didn't care, and just let stuff roll off my back or whatever, with some of these situations, because I just got to the point I just kind of zoned out with a lot of it. And then ultimately I ended up being able to grow from it. And I will definitely touch more on that in the next video, because I actually will be able to provide you guys with some resources, and how you can further protect yourself, like I had to grow to learn to do. Because I want to also preface all of this by saying that, um, I, at the end of the day, have no ill will towards any of these people in this moment. I 100% did not like a lot of the stuff that they did, but I recognize that at the end of the day, we are people. Sometimes certain personalities don't clash well. Sometimes certain groups of people don't clash well. I'm gonna just start off by saying that, and that's okay. You know, there are some situations where I really wish I would have handled things, like I said, a little differently, but I can't take none of that back. And I I ultimately recognized that I had some growing up to do myself, and that I had to learn how to stand up for myself in a way that, you know, um, that doesn't necessarily again cause harm, but to let people know, like, look, I don't have time for the shenanigans. I don't want to be a part of whatever this thing is. And I think that is what sparked a lot of the extra goings on, because of, like I said, in the beginning it was more so just the two particular neighbor groups, and then it ended up being a very diverse group of people showing up, of it, against very different ethnic backgrounds. And I was like, wow, like, how did I just, me my little self, trigger this many people, considering the fact that I primarily stay in house? Because, like I stated, I'm very much so an introvert. Like, I take solace in being to myself. And oftentimes, if my family and I weren't out and about or traveling or going to the park, local parks or whatever, we were at home, minding, chilling, minding our business. But there were some occasions I can sit here and admit that I lost my temper. Maybe not necessarily towards any of these people in particular, but I'm just saying that I lost my temper and may have had outbursts and made statements and comments that, like I said, I'm not proud of in this moment, because I recognize that a lot of that stuff I had said was out of anger. It was out of frustration. It wasn't even because that's how I genuinely feel. I just really, really just felt like I just wanted to be left alone. And it's just sad when you let someone or let people get you so much out of your own character you don't even recognize yourself. Like, the putting up the no trespassing sign, stuff like that was completely out of my character. That's why I did eventually take them down. I ended up taking them down, I want to say, three to 4 months after having them up. And sure enough to say, as soon as I did that, people immediately went right back in to disrespecting my space. Literally within the same hour of me taking it down, people started, pulling into my driveway as I was working on something in my garage, and doing all this weird stuff. Like, it was just like, again, I was like, man, like, these people really just, they're not gonna let go of whatever animosity that they're feeling towards me. Like, no one's gonna be adult enough to come and try to address it with me. And or if they didn't feel comfortable coming to me directly, they could have gone to leasing like I did. But I don't believe that none of them would have ever done that, because they just wanted to keep things going, whereas I didn't. In my mind, I'm like, hey, if you guys want to sit and go back and forth, I'm not your person. Like, I don't have the energy to sit and go back and forth with people. Like, that's just not a realm of emotion that I like to be in. I don't like to live in a space of just always fighting, fighting, fighting. I'm not a fighter in that sense. Like, I don't like to fight. Doesn't mean I can't, stand up and fight for myself if I need to, but I don't like to. I like very much so to be in my peace. So for me to still see that, even after doing that, just showing them like, hey, you know, I don't even feel this way anymore, and they immediately went right back. So it's like, what do you do in a situation like that? Like, how would you have handled it? Because with the exception of me, like I said, calling the police any and every time something happened, like, what else could I have done? You know? And if I would have filed a restraining order, again, the burden of proof to prove harassment would have been on me. And because, like I said, a lot of these cases, people were using children, it makes it an even harder case. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I just really felt backed into a corner. And like with most things, when you backing into a corner, it's gonna scratch back. Like, and in my case, it wasn't necessarily from a physical standpoint, but I definitely scratched back in my own way. I posted up a sign, or not a sign. I had a door. I had a door hanger on my door saying that, hey, me and my family don't have a welcome sign because we're not liars. And that was just our fun way of letting people know, like, yeah, we see what you guys are doing, but we still don't care, and you're still not welcome into our personal space. But Did they care? No, they proceeded to infringe upon that anyway. And and it's like I will admit I have a sarcastic type of sense of humor. So I just, again, it was never if someone tries to perceive that to mean anything other than that, then it's like, no, you're reaching, because that's again my reason for putting it up was just to let people know, like, yeah, we're not liars. We don't believe in, oh, everybody's welcome in our house in terms of just random people being able to come over and come by and come in. Like, no. I am a spiritual person more so now than I ever have. I know and I do indeed believe in, you have to be mindful of who you allow into your inner space and your inner sanctum, because otherwise it's just poor spiritual hygiene. People sometimes carry demons and motives and ulterior motives and stuff like that, that you got to be careful about who you allow in, on and around your space, around your kids, around your family. So yeah, like I was just, that was my, not so, or I still say it's polite, but that was my polite way of letting people know, like, no, we don't, we're good, and that wasn't towards, like I said, anyone in particular. That was just like I said, our just little PSA out there that, yeah, we're good, we're good. We don't need anyone to befriend us if they don't want to be friends with us. Like, we don't need people around us to feel welcome in the neighborhood and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, myself nor my husband were out there to make friends. Like, again, this was literally just supposed to be a stopping ground for us until my husband could finish out his contract, and then we'd be on our merry way, just like we've done many times before. So, um, so yeah, I'll say in this particular instance that I feel like it was just as much my fault as it was theirs. Like, at any point in time, any of us could have came together and been rational and sat down and just, rectified things, but we didn't. And I admit that like I said, I can admit my part that I played in that, and more so because I was just operating from a state of, like I said, anxiousness and just anxiety, and again, just wanting stuff to just be done. Like, I didn't want to have to sit there and go back and forth and, and tell grown people about themselves. Like, I just will never like having to do that, because it's that whole, like, okay, I'm grown enough to know when I'm messing up and when I'm doing something wrong, so you should too. But I recognize now that that's not everyone's maturity level, and that we all aren't on the same playing field when it comes to stuff like that. And I can understand that now. Like I said, in the moment, it was a lot harder to see, just because I had so many emotions going through me at that time. And a lot of it ended up, stirring up some of my own personal health issues that I struggle with. But again, that's not anyone else's, you know, thing to handle. That's a me thing, and that's why it was, ultimately the best decision for me as well as my family, from a mental as well as physical standpoint, to leave that place. Because I had grown to just really hate that place. I had grown, not necessarily my apartment per se, but just to hate California, which is sad because that was my very first time being in California. I already had reservations about being in California. I never really desired to be in California, but unfortunately, that's just where my husband's orders took him. So I essentially was just trying to make the best out of a already not so great situation anyway. And then just having that experience didn't help. Um, and to anyone that loves California, like, I, again, mean no disrespect, but I'm only speaking from my point of view and my experiences. And I can also understand that I'm sure that all of California is not like how it was there, but just in that moment, it felt like it was everywhere I went. I was enduring, just microaggressions, racism, macroaggressions. Not, like I said, not just from within the community, but without the, or with without the community as well. Yeah, I said that right. My bad. And it just got to a point where, like, I'm going to the grocery store and people are being snide and catty with me. I go to the post office, the postal workers trying to belittle me, and I'm like, bro, like, what is going on? Like, do I just have a sign on my face that says, hey, attack her, she's an easy target, attack her, she's, just like, it was so frustrating, because in most of these cases I wouldn't even acknowledge it, because I'm the type of person, like, if I know someone is actively trying to make me feel bad or trying to make me or trying to get a rise out of me, I'm not going to give you the satisfaction because oftentimes I think people think that because I don't say anything that I don't understand what they're trying to do. But I do. That's the thing. I do understand what you're trying to do, which is why I'm not going to give you the satisfaction because I'm intelligent enough to see when someone's trying to get the better of me, especially when I'm not operating from a place of emotion. So it's like, yeah, you can play that game all by yourself. I'm still going to choose to go high. I'll still sit here and tell you to have a good day and everything. Because at the end of the day, someone trying to tear down someone else means that they're already unequivocally beneath that person. So why would I need to sit there and go low with them because they are, got a wild hair up their butt and they want to try to take it out on me? Mm-mm. You hold that. I'm not going to hold that. You have to hold that. So that's what I'm saying. It just got to the point where it's like everywhere I went, seemingly people had negative reactions to me. Now, whether that has to do with just, again, my presence and just how I present myself and how I show up, or whether that has to do with, maybe rumors or stuff about like the situations that I had with these neighbors being circulated around, which I definitely lean more towards that. May have, conflated how some of these people were acting towards me. But again, even in a situation like that, to me is really childish because even if I had a situation with these particular neighbors, what did that have to do with you specifically? If I've never done anything to you specifically, why would you self insert yourself? These are grown people who can stand up and be accountable for themselves. So why is it that they all felt the need to have to go defend these grown people? Because no one stood up and defended me and my family. Not that I was looking for that, and not that I expect anyone to, because again, I'm woman enough to admit my wrongs and admit if I've misstepped or whatever, I can admit that. I don't have an ego problem, but I felt like a lot of these people were operating in ego, like they feel like it would kill them essentially to have to admit like, oh, yeah, I was being petty. I'm sorry, because again, if it would have ever been a case where these people would have presented themselves to me and my family, and we would have been able to mutually sit down, no bullshit, you know, no pettiness, no sneaky stuff, and just been able to sit down and discuss whatever our issues were, I would have been 100% open to that. But because again, no one ever came to me in regards to these particular situations and said, "Hey, I got a beef with you," or "Oh, I don't like that you did." So ultimately when someone doesn't tell you that they have issue with you, it's just a them problem. Just like with me in the beginning, it was just a me problem because I didn't know who to go state my grievance to. So the only persons that I knew I could tell were the leasing office. I didn't know, like I said, the parents in particular, to go to them and be like, hey, little Tommy, not that boy's name, because I don't know his name, but hey, little Tommy's doing this. You mind, talking to him and seeing if he. But again, we didn't have that type of repertoire, and even when the situation did arise, where um we could have had a sit down, uh, or mediated by our leasing office, my husband and I again let them know that we would be open if anything else arose. And like I said, things did continue, but it wasn't to that level and degree anymore. So, and then at that point, we both had just checked out, like, hey, let those people do whatever they want to do. At the end of the day, if they damage anything around the structure, on the structure, we have them on film doing it, so that it doesn't end up coming back on us, because that was another concern that we had, was like, okay, if someone gets injured, we have rental insurance, but we feel like that somehow might come back on us because these people keep putting themselves into our space, even though we're putting up all of these deterrents and everything. And I don't know what's louder than a no trespassing sign that someone doesn't want you in a certain space. You get what I'm saying? So it's like, if a person won't listen to my words, which I had already done once, if a person won't listen to the leasing office, which I had done twice, and if a person won't listen to a no trespassing sign, what else was I supposed to do? So, that's just how I resolved, all of that. And, you know, hindsight being 2020, going forward, I will be more direct. And I would encourage you all to do the same. There are some things that just aren't worth your energy. Like I stated earlier, you do have to be mindful of the people you allow around your inner space, the people you allow around you, because you never know what people's intentions are, especially these days and times where we just have so much going on in the world. And I'm not saying that all of these people are bad people or whatever, like, because again, I don't know them. I don't know them to know that. But all I can judge them off of was their character. And based on their character tells me, like, yeah, these weren't such good people. These weren't such nice people. And, and I'm sure they could easily feel like they could say the same about me. And that's fine because at the end of the day, I don't have anything to prove to anyone. I don't have anything to hide. I don't have anything that I, aren't am not willing to stand on. If I did it, I said it, then I meant it in that moment. Doesn't mean that it was right. Doesn't mean that it's something I should have done or said, but I'm woman enough to admit, hey, I can also be wrong. But these people, I got the feeling that no, they do no wrong. And, like I said, they can just do whatever they want. And you just got to deal with it and just take it. And that's pretty much the attitude that I continue to perceive from the neighborhood all around me. And like I said, most of this stuff was was going on for what, almost, yeah, this month will make 2 years up until my family and I left. And I'll even give you a little update on all of that, in the sense that my family and I, we just moved here in October to where we are now. And even the day we were moving out, these same people were showing up around our home and stuff like that as we were moving. And I guess, having their little mini celebrations or whatever from what we could see. Because even my son was like, yeah, mom, like, I was just sitting out here, with the truck and with the moving truck, and all these women out of nowhere just come and just were staring at me. And I just kind of like stared back at them. And I was like, yeah. So I'm like, that lets me know that even still, even as we were leaving, these people just wanted it to be felt that we weren't welcome and that they were glad to see us go, which I was glad to go, because that's the one thing about me and my family is that we had already been plotting our escape, if you will. We had already been plotting our escape for like the last 6 months. I had been searching just so hard to find us a new place to go in California, but we just didn't find anything. And we didn't recognize that the housing um, situation out there is just so bad. Like, there's so much competition for apartments and stuff. So we ultimately ended up looking out of state, and we were able to find something. But I think that's another reason why me and my husband just kind of checked out to everything, because we were like, hey, we're leaving anyway, because we were leaving because we wanted to. It's not because these people rushed us out or pushed us out. We left because we wanted to leave. And at the end of the day, we felt like we deserved a better space, a bigger space, more so a space with an actual yard that our children could, play and do whatever, we do as a family, because we do like to do outdoors activities. We like to go on hikes and trails and stuff like that. And I definitely gathered that, there might have been some jealousy from these people because of stuff like that. Because there was an occasion where my family and I took a trip to the Grand Canyon, and we had been talking about it all week long. We were just so excited about it, and ended up like overhearing people on our camera, who, after, of course, after they triggered it, talking about, oh yeah, Arizona and Grand Canyon, yeah, yeah. And I was like, wait, how the heck these people know where me and my family going? Like, we don't talk to none of y'all. We don't know where y'all going unless y'all are eavesdropping on my family. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, it's the type of stuff like that that we were like, yeah, you know what? No, like, we wanna move somewhere where we can have peace of mind, that we can do what we want, say what we want, be ourselves, and have more privacy and have more personal space. Because clearly, it's that whole, it's like people were hating, but it's like how that Chris Brown saying go, talking about how you gonna hate when you can't even get inside the club, Like, how does that, make or break your day? to see me and my family doing the things that we're doing when you can easily do the same. And that's something I always said. It's like, the things that I'm doing with my family, anyone can do, and it doesn't take a lot of money either. It doesn't take a lot of time. You just have to have the willpower to want to do so and to be active and involved with your family. And I know, there were a lot of days that my family and I spent inside, maybe not necessarily because of this situation in the end, but it more so is just because we were focused on, like I said, packing up our house and getting our stuff ready to go. But even while moving, there I still experienced, kids coming by saying, making comments and statements about, previous occasions of things that had happened. But like I said, at that point, I had already checked out. I was just kind of smiling in the inside because I was like, yeah, I'm like, again, I know no one can hurt me. I know no one has hurt me or can do anything towards me or my family anymore because we're leaving. And, that was one of the best feelings, being able to pull out of that driveway for the last time and know that I was leaving that place in my rearview mirror. And I was like, I really hope that those people who all participated in that wake up one day and realize that, like I said, for me, none of it was ever personal. It was simply just me and my family just being ourselves and living our own lives. And, and I really hope that they get the help that they need. For stuff like that, to be able to better take rejection, because again, it was never like, oh, we just don't f with you because we just don't f with you. It's like, no, like, y'all were moving funny and we peeped that, so we're moving accordingly. Like, what do I look like allowing people around my family that would do things like that? Like, no, absolutely not. And I just want to press that it is important to speak your truth and to understand that all these things ultimately happen for a reason. And that's how I choose to look at it. And I am grateful. I may not have been grateful in the moment, but I'm grateful that those things happen because it helped me to look inward. It helped me to challenge a lot of things about myself, about a lot of things in the way that I think, the way that I feel, and just maybe even some traumas that it helped me to unpack that I didn't even realize were still affecting me. So going through tough times really can grow you to for the better. I'm not saying that that's always going to be the case. I'm not saying that that is always the case, but that's just what I'm choosing to take from it. I'm choosing to turn that negative experience into a positive, and henceforth how this channel was born. All of that is what led to me ultimately deciding to make this channel. And I want to also go out there to say that this is actually not my first time being on YouTube. This is actually my third time being on YouTube. So I'm not new to YouTube per se. Um, but this is my first channel where I have just chosen to focus on life and inspiration. And again, just sharing my personal experiences with things and hoping that someone can gain something from it, whether it be encouragement, whether it be, hey, what not to do. Because I'm okay with being used as the example, as as a poster child for, hey, these are the do's and don'ts. Don't do what Ashley did. That's fine. Like, if it'll help someone avoid some of these pitfalls that I found myself in, that's absolutely fine. If if you're a person that struggles with, like, social anxiety and stuff like that, like myself, um maybe you can, like I said, especially in the next video, maybe you can take some of those tips that I plan to give you guys and apply them so that, like I said, you don't find yourself in the same situation I found myself. However, I do also recognize that there's a spiritual component to a lot of this stuff that we endure, especially more so now than ever. And I know for me personally, a lot of it is spiritual. That's why I'm not even mad at the people per se anymore. Like, even if I was at a time, I'm not any longer, for the sole fact that I recognize that a lot of these people were being used by spirits and entities, whether they recognize that or not, which oftentimes they don't, because that's just how that goes. But because it's the same repeated behaviors, the same type of things, that's how I know it's spirits. It's not these people per se, because I really would hope that people got better things to do with their day than to sitting here, trying to figure me out because I'll tell you right now, I'm an enigma. I can't even figure myself out. Like every day for me is new. Every day I'm learning something new. I'm doing something new. I like to challenge myself in those areas to just always better myself. So you'll never figure me out because I can't figure myself out. And also, it's like there are better things that people could do with their time than to gang stalk and to harass people. Like all of that energy you're putting into doing stuff like that, you could easily be taking it and studying, harder to graduate college or bolster a new skill, a new hobby, something that, because that's what I did during all of this. During every breakdown that I had, I instantly was able to pull myself out of it and then tapped into a new hobby and then tapped into a new creative project, which I also will be sharing with you guys in the next video. So I hope you stay tuned and look forward to that. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for listening. I know it was a lot. I know it was all over the place. That's just how I am sometimes. I try to make sure I give people the whole picture. I know there are a lot of things that may be lacking specific details, and that's just because again, I'm trying to do this with integrity. I don't want to again uh target these people or their families. So for those reasons, any personal information that I do know and or have about them, I'm choosing to keep that private just because again, that's not the end game of why I'm, presenting this series. However, I do want to make a just quick note that any and everything that I've discussed in this backstory, I actually do have proof of, and I have documentation of. So again, if stuff like this ever did need to go to a like a court system, some I have that stuff. So I don't want you to think that I'm just making this stuff up or that this is just my vivid imagination. It's not, baby. I got the footage. I got it all. Okay, so but I'm just grateful that it never had to get to that point, and I'm just glad that I grew up enough to recognize that I don't have to stay in a place where I'm not loved, I'm not celebrated, and I'm not wanted. But yeah, I'm grateful for each and every one of you who've stuck it out. Thank you for listening. Again, learn from my mistakes, um, and I hope that you have a better picture as to why I believe I became a targeted individual for me in my particular personal case and study, because I know that this may not be you know, uh, everyone's experience, but it was mine. But thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, see ya.